Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I hope that everybody had some time to rest, and especially those who came to Vienna from a long distance, that you also had some time to enjoy beautiful Vienna. But we have plenty of things to do, so let's resume our business, and let's start our morning session. But before moving to our items in the agenda, I would like to give the floor to Secretariat for a brief announcement.
Thank you very much, President. I would just like to shortly share an update on the informal consultations which will take place today. As usual, this information was sent by email yesterday, but it might be helpful to remind everybody. So the informal consultations on L8 on firearms will be held today in M4 from 10 to 1, and then again in the afternoon from 3 to 6. The informal consultations on L9, which is the one on crimes that affect the environment, will be held in the press room, also from 10 to 1, and then again from 3 to 6 p.m. And maybe in the evening in the conference room 3 on the 7th floor in the C building from 7 to 9. And the informal consultations on the decision, L10, will be held in the press room from 1 to 3 p.m. And as usual, if you didn't manage to write all this down, this information was already shared through Indico email yesterday evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, we would now resume the discussion under agenda item 2B, entitled Protocol to Prevent, Suppress and Punish Trafficking in Persons, especially Women and Children. The item, as you know, started yesterday, but we still have many speakers on the list, and to be able to finish all items in the agenda by Friday 18 o'clock sharp, we would like to ask the speakers to keep their statements within the limit of 3 minutes. And now, without further ado, I call on the distinguished representative of Azerbaijan to make his statement.
Thank you, Mr. President. Azerbaijan is strongly committed to combating trafficking in persons and supports every effort directed to addressing root causes of human trafficking and other related criminal offenses. As a party to the relevant international and regional instruments, including the UNTOC and its protocol to prevent, suppress and punish trafficking in persons, especially women and children, Azerbaijan has also adopted an overarching legal framework for effective action against human trafficking. Currently, Azerbaijan is implementing the third national plan, which guides the work of national agencies towards revealing, eradicating reasons for trafficking in human beings, protecting of rights of victims and their social rehabilitation. At the same time, an interagency task force led by the national coordinator and the specialized police unit within the Ministry of Internal Affairs has been created, and the national system for identification of and support for trafficking victims has been established. We recall that in the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, the UN member states committed to taking immediate and effective measures to eradicate and end modern slavery, human trafficking. Also, it's important to note that in preventing and combating human trafficking in all its forms, particular focus should be given to the situation of the vulnerable persons, in particular migrants, refugees, and internally displaced persons. Mr. President, over the past 3 decades, Azerbaijan faced acute problem of refugees and IDPs. Around 1 million Azerbaijanis became refugees and IDPs as a result of forcible expulsion and displacement. We would like to emphasize that ensuring the rights of all refugees and IDPs without discrimination is an essential element for consolidation of peace and stability, in particular in post-conflict settings. Thank you, Mr. President.
I wish to thank the representative of Azerbaijan for his statement, and now I would like to give the floor to the representative of Indonesia. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President. Indonesia shares concern about the current trend of trafficking in person. Our concerns are growing due to emergence of newer crimes and the criminal groups' advanced use of technology. In this connection, we are working continuously to fortify our effort and enhance our national capacity to combat this crime. Strengthening law enforcement to combat crime and syndicate is priority for Indonesia. Therefore, through the presidential decree in 2023, the Indonesian National Police is assigned as steering chair on the National Task Force in preventing and combating trafficking in person. The task force is to become avenue for more than 20 Indonesian line ministries and agencies to work together. In conjunction with the national effort, the Indonesian National Police has also established its own TIP task force at national and provincial levels. The task force reflects Indonesia's high commitment to pursuing the effective law enforcement and criminal justice system, particularly to increase the conviction rate on TIP cases. Mr. President and distinguished delegates, in this flight, we would like to appeal to this meeting to explore collective effort and initiative to address this issue. We must identify how we can continue strengthening law enforcement and criminal justice responses. Our effort may involve enhancing coordinating among member states to achieve the following goals. 1. Increasing public awareness. 2. Protecting the victim. And 3. Disrupting the criminal syndicates. Promoting regional and international cooperation is a consistent element that is key to combating this crime. I would like to mention the Bali process as good example of collective effort in our region. Co-chaired by Indonesia and Australia, this initiative provides various programs, capacity building, and outreach to combat trafficking in person in the Asia-Pacific region. This is in line with the mission of UNTOC and complement the implementation on the convention. By understanding the uniqueness of this crime that transcends borders, its patterns, the nexus with the other transnational organized crime, the victim profile, its cash flow and network, we can build comprehensive solution to disrupt and prevent it from happening to other places in this world. Given the magnitude of the TIP issues, Indonesia looks forward to robust cooperation and collaboration with respective member states to tackle this crime. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Indonesia for his statement, and now I would like to give the floor to the representative of Tanzania.
Thank you, Mr. President. The government of the United Republic of Tanzania ratified the UNTOC and its protocols to prevent and suppress and punish trafficking, especially women and children, in year 2006. Since the ratification, Tanzania has demonstrated commitment by domesticating the international protocols by enacting legislation which criminalize acts of traffickers and associates, also provide care, assistance, and treatment to the victim. Mr. President, in the year 2008, the United Republic of Tanzania enacted the Anti-Trafficking in Person Acts number 6 and its regulation. In the year 2011, the government established the Anti-Trafficking in Person Committee and its secretariat to oversee the implementation of the acts and coordinate the government efforts in countering trafficking in persons. In the year 2015, the committee and its secretariat developed the first national anti-trafficking in persons action, which worked effectively to combat trafficking in person. In the year 2016, the government developed the Safe Family Reunification Guidelines for children victims of trafficking. This was done by Anti-Trafficking Secretariat through the Anti-Trafficking Committee in collaboration with the International Organization for Migration, IOM. In year 2020, the United Republic of Tanzania developed the national guidelines for establishment and management of safe houses for victims of trafficking and survivors of violence. We have also another action plan which is in place, which is of 2022. It ends this year, which is in place, and after each of the plans, we make a self-assessment and review. Another remarkable thing we have done after reviewing our legislation is the amendment of the Anti-Trafficking Act of year 2008, which we did in 2022 to remove the sentencing provisions that allow the offenders to pay fines in lieu of imprisonment. The punishment now is mandatory. Imprisonment is payable in addition to the punishment. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of Tanzania for his statement, and now I would like to give the floor to the representative of Kuwait.
Thank you, President. Good morning, everyone. This delegation attaches great importance to the subject of the current session. It is an appropriate means for participating states to share their experiences in countering trafficking in persons in light of the UNTOC and various international and regional relevant instruments. The State of Kuwait enacted Law Number 91 of 2013 on countering trafficking in persons and smuggling of migrants, which provided for aggravating circumstances in all acts that lead to trafficking in persons, in addition to concealing the accused and the proceeds, in addition to confiscation. This law punishes equally the legal representative and the effective director of the legal personality when the commission of this crime is committed on behalf of a legal personality, in addition to punishing any previous knowledge, unreported previous knowledge, as to attempt to commit this crime. Equally, this provided for provisions covering the use or threat of use of force or the use of bribery to compel somebody to submit a false statement or false information. Chair, it is our belief that the legal and practical means to address trafficking in persons and smuggling of migrants is a challenge in and of itself, which necessitates consolidated efforts at the national level in terms of coordination. The Ministry of Justice, under the directives of the Cabinet, has set up and drafted a national strategy to counter this crime, that is trafficking in persons and smuggling of migrants, in addition to setting up a comprehensive national coordination committee, which includes all relevant competent authorities when it comes to trafficking in countering trafficking in persons in Kuwait, in addition to the promulgation of a national referral system which is precise and clear when it comes to dealing with victims. Additionally, we covered in our legislations domestic labor and specifications of this profession. To conclude, our legislations focus on relief and damage and on facilitating all means to rectify the situation. Thank you.
I wish to thank the representative of Kuwait for his statement, and now I would like to give the floor to the representative of Chile.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, President. Trafficking in persons is one of the most devastating crimes committed by organised crime networks, since it exploits the vulnerability of individuals, especially women and children, for the purposes of profit. We view with concern that in addition to sexual exploitation, which is the most common form of this crime, forced labour has been increasing in a significant manner, particularly in areas like agriculture, construction, and domestic work. The use of threats, violence, and tricks are the main tools that these organisations use to control victims and to perpetuate their exploitation. What is concerning is that due to the vulnerability of the people affected, the reporting of these crimes is low, and this favours a high level of impunity and makes criminal prosecution more difficult. Chile, due to its geographical location, has become a point of transit and destination for trafficking in persons, especially through land routes. These routes usually use unauthorized crossing points in the northern area, which makes it more difficult to identify and capture the traffickers. In addition, the same structure which facilitates the illicit trafficking of the smuggling of migrants is used for the exploitation of victims, showing the interconnection between both crimes. What is crucial is that the efforts to combat this type of crime focus on strengthening international cooperation, improving victim protection mechanisms, and strengthening work with the private sector. Thank you very much, President.
I thank the representative of Chile for his statement, and now I'd like to give the floor to the representative of Japan.
Thank you, Mr. President. Combating human trafficking is one of the key policy issues for Japan, and in order to address this issue comprehensively and in a coordinated manner across the entire government, we have formulated Japan's action plan to combat trafficking in persons. Based on this plan, we are implementing various measures. Additionally, we produce an annual report that consolidates Japan's efforts against human trafficking to keep track of the latest trends, assess the progress of different policies, and raise public awareness about the realities of human trafficking and the importance of combating it. In Japan, relevant agencies work closely together from all angles, such as cracking down on human trafficking offenses, promoting the identification of victims, and ensuring the protection and support of victims, to take strict and effective measures against human trafficking. Thank you.
I wish to thank the representative of Japan for his statement, and now I would like to give the floor to the representative of Armenia, followed by Venezuela.
Thank you, Mr. President. Armenia has set a comprehensive interagency approach and national mechanism in the fight against human trafficking and has implemented 7 national programs, with the latest one in 2023. Together with the UNTOC and its protocol, Armenia's legal framework is shaped by the Council of Europe Convention Against Trafficking in Human Organs, which Armenia joined in 2018. Hence, the Criminal Code of the Republic of Armenia was brought into compliance with the international requirement setting out criminal responsibility for human trafficking and exploitation, including for the illegal circulation of human organs and tissues. Armenia effectively cooperates with the UN, OSCE, and the Council of Europe over combating human trafficking. Victim-centered approach is key for the successful prevention, detection, and combating of such crimes. National legislation of Armenia foresees measures for protecting witnesses and victims, as well as preventive measures for ensuring transparency, promoting equal access to transplants. Armenia has established a commission on identification of victims of trafficking in human beings and exploitation, with the sole authority to recognize a person as a victim. Mr. President, armed conflict and human trafficking frequently coincide with vulnerable populations facing an increased risk for exploitation and trafficking. Forced displacement is one of the major factors that contribute to an individual vulnerability to trafficking. Unfortunately, since 2020, our region too has been facing a growing risk of trafficking against the background of continuous acts of aggressions, atrocities, and other gross violations of international humanitarian law, resulted in forced displacement of the entire indigenous Armenian population from their home, as observed particularly by the International Court of Justice, Commissioner for Human Rights, Council of Europe, and other reputable international organizations, as well as by Human Rights Watch and Freedom House. Extrajudicial killings, tortures, mutilations, dismembering of bodies are not the only war crimes committed, as recognized also by the report of the UN Committee Against Torture of April 23, 2024. Dozens of Armenians were last videotaped or photographed in captivity, which were posted in social media before their disappearing. Custody over those captive Armenians, as well as abducted afterwards, is unfortunately denied. Under such circumstances, there are serious suspicions that those captives and hostages may be subject to trafficking, including for organs, slavery, and other criminal offenses. Armenia underscores the importance of synergy between different UN agencies, as well as cooperation with CSOs and human rights organizations for the identification and implementation of effective measures and international responsibility for preventing the trafficking in persons in the conflict-affected areas. We consider that this subject should be one of the priorities of the Interagency Coordination Group Against Trafficking in Persons. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of Armenia for his statement. Now I would like to give the floor to the representative of Venezuela, followed by Algeria.
Thank you, President. Trafficking in persons is one of the most terrible crimes which affects millions around the world, especially women and girls, who are the main victims. Criminal networks exploit their vulnerability, trapping them in cycles of abuse, exploitation, and violence. This crime destroys families and communities, leaving behind it deep scars which remain for generations. My country firmly believes that victims need to be at the center of our efforts and policies to eradicate this scourge. To tackle this crime, my country has promoted a draft bill for the prevention and punishment of the crime of trafficking in persons and comprehensive victim assistance, which is currently being discussed at our National Assembly. This legal framework will strengthen our capacity to prevent and punish this crime in a most effective manner. Moreover, we have created national prosecutors specialized in the trafficking in persons. In cooperation with UNICEF, we've also developed a manual for the investigation of the crime of trafficking in persons with a special focus on the protection of women, boys, girls, and adolescents, strengthening the capacities of the state institutions. President, my country has strengthened its institutional framework with the creation of the National Council Against Trafficking in Persons, responsible for coordinating actions between state institutions, social organizations, and the private sector. This coordination assures not only the prevention and punishment of the crime, but also comprehensive victim assistance, restoring their dignity and rights. At the same time, the Ombudsman's Office has established the Special Delegate of the Ombudsman for the protection of migrants, refugees, and victims of trafficking in persons. This body works tirelessly to guarantee the rights of victims of trafficking and to protect their dignity in line with the tenets of our Constitution. Venezuela rigorously complies with its international commitments in the framework of the United Nations Convention against Transnational Organized Crime and its protocols. As a member of the Group of Friends Against Trafficking in Persons, my country has focused its efforts on protecting the most vulnerable, adopting a comprehensive approach which involves all sectors of society. At the same time, my country would like to reiterate its commitment to combating trafficking in persons in all its forms. And we're doing this starting from awareness raising and prevention campaign designs. And this goes all the way up to implementing an implacable justice system against those who profit from the dehumanization of other human beings. President, trafficking in persons converts human beings into goods for criminal networks who profit from other people's suffering. This crime robs people of their dignity and breaks their links with their families and communities. My country calls on states to cooperate in this fight with policies which not only rescue victims but return to them their dignity and hope for a better future. Combating this scourge needs to be a global priority. Thank you very much.
I wish to thank the representative of Venezuela. And now I would like to give the floor to the representative of Algeria, followed by Uganda.
Algeria has accorded great attention to trafficking in persons, given its international character and how it negatively impacts individual freedoms and rights, including namely women, children, and vulnerable groups. The crime has been included in our penal code at the beginning of 2009, and in 2016 we've established a National Committee on the Prevention of Trafficking in Person. It was tasked with the establishment of a national strategy and action plan related to the prevention of trafficking in persons and the protection of victims. It is true that this is an utterly outlandish phenomenon to our society. However, Algeria, being keen to respect its international obligations and to promote the prevention of this crime in a more efficient manner, has enacted in 2023 a new law to look into all aspects of this crime, to provide protection to victims and to provide social, mental health services, as well as legal assistance and social reintegration services. We have also supported the integration of civil society organizations in all efforts undertaken at the national and local levels related to trafficking in persons, and to assist victims, ensure their access to justice, and that they benefit from legal services on all levels, including the protection of witnesses and whistleblowers, and to consider individuals who are victims of trafficking in persons as victims and are not to be held accountable at the penal or civil levels. Given the technological advancement and the exploitation of criminal groups of the latest technologies, it was important to adopt the necessary legal measures and to adopt special investigation techniques for the collection of evidence, looking into IT means and geolocalization of victims. We fully support the promotion of international cooperation in the security and legal fields, and to work more actively on cracking down on all types of crimes. And we have given great attention to the education of all respondents by developing internal and regional trainings. As we are keen on developing our services that provide greater protection to victims, we have established a national referral mechanism, including a number of measures to be adopted in order to provide greater protection to trafficking in persons victims through the relevant authorities, and to ensure that they have access to greater rights since their early identification to the final stages of support. In conclusion, I would like to thank UNODC for its support to all states in order to enforce the Palermo Convention and its protocols related to the combating of all forms of serious crimes. Thank you for your attention.
Representative of Algeria for her statement, and now I'd like to give the floor to the representative of Uganda, followed by Belarus.
Thank you, Chair. Uganda would like to thank the UNODC for the update on the review of implementation of the UNTOC and the protocols thereto. Trafficking in persons is a grave violation of human rights that concerns all of us. Uganda is a source, it's a transit route and destination for victims of trafficking in persons. The human trafficking phenomenon has mainly affected women and children. In Uganda, human trafficking has manifested itself in various ways, and this includes sexual exploitation, child labor, child street begging, labor exploitation, human and ritual sacrifice, organ harvesting, debt, bondage, slavery, and servitude. It suffices to note that human trafficking is amorphous and the trends keep changing. Uganda has taken significant steps to prevent, to protect, and combat, and also prosecute perpetrators of trafficking in persons. Uganda ratified the UNTOC in 2005 and the Human Trafficking Protocol in 2023, and we have complied with Article 5 of the Convention that calls upon all state parties to criminalize human trafficking by enacting the Prevention of Trafficking in Persons Act. The Act emphasizes prevention of the vice of trafficking in persons, protection of victims, and partnership with stakeholders to fight trafficking in persons and prosecute perpetrators. We have also enacted the Uganda Human Organ Donation and Transplant Act of 2022 to provide for the regulation of removal, storage, and transplantation of human organs, tissues, and cells for therapeutic purposes. Uganda issued the Employment Recruitment of Migrant Workers Regulations 2021 to regulate the recruitment and placement of migrant workers. Our National Action Plan for the Prevention of Trafficking in Persons outlines actions and comprehensive strategies to combat trafficking in persons. It calls upon all stakeholders to coordinate effectively at national, regional, and international level, and emphasizes the identification of victims for rescue measures. Uganda also regularly undertakes massive sensitization campaigns to create awareness about human trafficking. Additional measures have also put in place to prioritize a victim-centered and trauma-informed approach. Furthermore, investigations and prosecutions are focused on restitution and compensation of victims, as well as recovery of assets and proceeds of crime. It is therefore important that the prevention of smuggling of migrants take a multidisciplinary approach in tackling root causes of migration, addressing trade, employment, inequalities, natural disasters, political instability, poverty, and education. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Uganda. Now I'd like to give the floor to the representative of Belarus, followed by Angola.
Thank you, President. Although over the course of the past few decades, the international community has actively been combating trafficking in persons, this topic continues to attract particular attention in the world and continues to be relevant. The effective implementation of the main international legally binding document, the Protocol to Combat Trafficking in Persons, is crucial in achieving progress in counteracting this crime. In this regard, we welcome the accession of new countries to the protocol over the past period. We note the important role of the UNODC in providing assistance to states in implementing the Palermo Protocol. Belarus commends the work of the Working Group on Trafficking in Persons. We call for all its recommendations to be fully implemented, these recommendations developed by the working group. Success in counteracting trafficking in persons depends on the effective implementation of other documents too in this area, including the UN Global Plan of Action to Combat Trafficking in Persons and UNGA resolutions. Last December, the UN General Assembly adopted a resolution initiated by Belarus on improving the coordination of efforts to combat trafficking in persons. This document underscores the importance of implementing the protocol, and it focuses attention on the important role of the Interagency Coordination Group Against Trafficking in Persons, ICAT, in organizing coordination and cooperation in the global combat against trafficking in persons. We fully support UNODC's diverse and comprehensive efforts, including as a coordinator of ICAT, aimed at improving preventive measures and implementing leading experience in trafficking in persons. We welcome the corresponding briefings and thematic events which ICAT is holding in order to inform states. Belarus, for its part, as chair of the Group of Friends to Combat Trafficking in Persons, is seeking to regularly ensure interaction between the group and ICAT. Belarus commends ICAT's focus in recent years on important aspects of trafficking in persons, such as trafficking in persons in supply chains and trafficking in persons and ICTs. Equally importantly, the Criminal Justice and Crime Prevention Commission adopted a resolution on this topic in 2023 and another one in 2024. On taking action against trafficking in persons in business operations, public procurement and supply chains for goods and services, and countering trafficking in persons in the context of rapid technological change. Both resolutions were initiated by Belarus. These documents, of course, will facilitate our shared efforts to combat trafficking in persons and thereby contribute to achieving the Sustainable Development Agenda. We note the particular relevance of Resolution 33/1 in the light of the recent adoption by the UN General Assembly of the Global Digital Compact. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Belarus for his statement. Now I would like to give the floor to the representative of Angola, followed by Ecuador.
Gracias, señor presidente. El gobierno de Angola sigue firme y activamente comprometido con la aplicación de la Convención.
So Angola is committed to the UNTOC and its additional protocols. With regards to the implementation of the protocol, the Interministerial Department to Counter Trafficking in Persons was established. And we work with the 4Ps: prevention, prosecution, and cooperation. So not all P's in English. We work based on a guide on trafficking in persons written by our Attorney General's office. And we have many training activities and different meetings all over Angola, with 15 training courses for the national police, for diplomats, and for social media professionals. Then we have a regional cross-border forum between Angola and DRC on trafficking in persons. Then we had a bilateral meeting between Angola and Mozambique on trafficking in persons, and we shared good practices. This took place in September 2024. With regards to good practices, we would like to highlight the implementation of the benchmark for protection of victims. Then reception, repatriation, and family reunification of victims of trafficking, with an emphasis on Vietnamese, DRC, Nigeria, and Angola citizens. With regard to the prosecution of the perpetrators from 2015 until today, the database shows 2007 cases. Angola is part of the database of the SADC region. With regards to this cooperation, we are working very actively in cooperation with SADC countries, with the IMO and non-governmental organizations, the U.S. Embassy in Angola, and the European Union representatives. We work with other states and other organizations, including France, Portugal, and DRC. We are aware that we still have a lot to do with regards to combating trafficking in persons. We need a better information campaign. We need better training for our law enforcement agencies. We need to better monitor cases and know more about migratory flows and protect victims more. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Angola for her statement, and now I would like to give the floor to the representative of Ecuador, followed by Qatar.
Buenos días. Good morning, President, colleagues. Ecuador will talk about 2B and 2C. President, Ecuador understands that trafficking in persons and smuggling of migrants are the consequence of restrictive migratory policies that are imposed. Therefore, we believe there should be a holistic vision to deal with these transnational crimes. And for that, the Convention of Palermo and its protocols are of great importance. Ecuador considers that trafficking in persons and smuggling of migrants are serious crimes. Our criminal code establishes severe sentences for the perpetrators. This reflects the commitment of our country to counter these crimes, which do not just have an impact on state security, but also on human dignity. As a result of the implementation of the Palermo Convention and its protocols, Ecuador has a law against trafficking in persons and smuggling of migrants, which focus on human rights and guarantee prevention, assistance, and protection to investigations and reparation to victims of both crimes in line with international standards. The Human Mobility Law establishes the regulatory framework to protect the rights of people who are moving. That includes banning the smuggling of migrants, and it protects the victims of this crime, as well as introducing preventive measures and penalties against the smuggling of migrants, emphasizing the importance of international cooperation. President, for public policies, the Action Plan Against the Smuggling of Migrants 2024-2030 establishes actions based on 4 different axes: promotion, prevention, assistance and protection, and then prosecution. Ecuador is combating trafficking in persons and smuggling of migrants and its negative impact on the victim and close family. Ecuador has developed different technical instruments, such as guidelines for the investigation of the smuggling of migrants, guidelines for the crime of trafficking in persons, and we are working with UNODC and other UN agencies to design public policies that will strengthen the capacity of the state to combat trafficking in persons and smuggling of migrants. We have therefore subscribed to and implemented several bilateral instruments to work with different countries in the region. Ecuador has reiterated the importance of reflecting on different views on migrants to promote balanced narratives that highlight their contribution and enable their inclusion in the host society. Finally, Ecuador believes that regulating migrants improves conditions for human rights and reduces risks and weaknesses linked to irregular migration. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Ecuador for her statement, and now I would like to give the floor to the representative of Qatar, followed by France.
Shukran, Sayyid Rais.
Thank you, Chair. The state of Qatar criminalizes all forms of trafficking in persons, including the recruitment of individuals, their forced transportation, different forms of kidnapping, scams, deception, and any kind of preying on vulnerability, all forms of sexual exploitation, slavery, bondage labor, organ removal. Inter alia. Qatar has joined the protocol on the combating and preventing of trafficking in persons, namely women and children, of 2009, and has been fully committed to its obligations. It has established the 2011 law, number 15, on criminalizing this crime and limiting the negative impacts of that crime. In 2017, we've established the National Commission on Trafficking in Persons in order to coordinate the national efforts. And we have opened up a new safe home for victims of trafficking in persons in coordination with the Red Cross. Qatar is engaged with a number of coordination relations with relevant regional and international organizations, namely UNODC. We have also supported the UN Action Plan on combating trafficking in persons. Chairperson, crimes of trafficking in persons, namely those targeting women and children, still pose a great threat to humanity, hinder economic and social development, and the situation gets even worse as a result of the global instability and global conflicts and the dwindling levels of the rule of law and international relations. As a result, we need greater and more comprehensive efforts in order to combat effectively this crime and all forms of transnational organized crimes. On this occasion, I would like to commend the efforts exerted by UNODC in order to support the full implementation on the Protocol on Trafficking in Persons as indicated in the UNODC report submitted to the conference, and would like to commend the efforts exerted by the Trafficking in Persons working group, and we call for the full implementation of its recommendations, noting specifically the latest meeting held by that group in July, as it called for greater international collaboration, greater technical assistance and capacity building, and greater efforts in order to combat specific forms of crimes related to trafficking in persons, specifically trafficking in persons for the sake of organ removal and for the sake of forced trade and terrorism and the sexual exploitation of children. Thank you, Chairperson.
Representative of Qatar for his statement, and now I would like to give the floor to the representative of France, followed by Burkina Faso.
Merci, Monsieur. Thank you, President. France endorses the statement made by the European Union and would like to make the following comments in its national capacity. Even in France, this criminal phenomenon is on the increase. It is an attack on human rights. It can take on different forms: sexual exploitation, labor exploitation, being forced to commit crimes, forced begging. We are concerned by the drama and the serious violation of rights that victims suffer. Combating trafficking in persons, which generates billions of euros a year, requires international cooperation with all stakeholders involved: state, international organizations, notably UNODC, civil society, the private sector, and researchers. In this regard, France encourages all countries to ratify and fully implement the additional protocol to prevent, repress, and sanction trafficking in persons, especially women and children. We encourage all countries to join the Blue Heart campaign of UNODC to make citizens aware of this crime and highlight the situation of the victims. This highlights the need for states, civil society, and the private sector to join together to prevent the crime and combat the criminal networks. We need to combat all forms of exploitation and grant specific attention to the most vulnerable people. France has identified several priorities in its new national plan to combat trafficking in persons, including improvement of protection of citizens, either French or migrants, as they suffer from attacks on human dignity, and we are reinforcing the effectiveness of our national criminal policy to dismantle and prosecute the criminal networks, especially the transnational ones. We hosted the Olympic and Paralympic Games this year, and we introduced specific measures to make people aware and to prevent and combat human trafficking in this context, and to accompany the victims that we identified. We're ready to share our experience and good practices with everyone with regards to international sporting events. Thank you.
I thank the representative of France for her statement, and now I would like to give the floor to the representative of Burkina Faso, followed by Thailand.
Monsieur le Président.
President, distinguished delegates, Burkina Faso is marked by the presence of organized criminal groups, and increased terrorism is worsening our recurring problems and migratory crisis. We suffer from armed groups, and this exacerbates criminal activities linked to trafficking in persons and smuggling of migrants. We need more cooperation and more research if we want to become more effective. To reduce impunity for criminal networks, Burkina Faso has joined several international, multilateral and regional legal instruments. In 2002, we ratified UNTOC and its different protocols, including the protocol to prevent trafficking in persons, especially women and children, and the protocol against the smuggling of migrants by land, sea, and air. Domestically, law 025/2018 of the 31st of May 2018 introduced those crimes into our criminal code, and this was ratified by Burkina Faso, and these are now part of our criminal code. In institutional terms, the law enforcement agencies benefit from the input of different ministries regarding smuggling of persons. This includes ministries to protect children and the Ministry of Labour. We have a national action plan against trafficking in persons. We introduced this in 2023, and this shows that our authorities wish to end trafficking in persons. We have been able to mobilize all national stakeholders in a process that is inclusive and guarantees participation. We have partners to provide financing for these actions. And finally, we now have an annual commemoration of World Day Against Trafficking in Persons. Our national action plan is a step forwards, a decisive step forwards to achieving better results in countering trafficking in persons in Burkina Faso. Mobilizing considerable resources is still a significant challenge. President, distinguished delegates, Burkina Faso reiterates its willingness to work with all stakeholders to promote cooperation to counter trafficking in persons and smuggling of migrants, to reinforce our national capacity, and to make our populations aware of the protection for victims. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Burkina Faso for his statement. Now I'd like to give the floor to the representative of Thailand, followed by Morocco.
As a representative from Thailand, I would like to address the critical issue human trafficking, particularly to traffic of women and children. Our commitment to the protocol to prevent, suppress, and punish trafficking in person, especially women and children, is unwavering. In Thailand, we recognize that human trafficking is complex crime that requires comprehensive approach. Our strategy encompasses three critical pillars: prevention, suppression, and punishment. Statistically, according to Anti-Trafficking in Person Division report, there are 270 cases have been reported in the system from the beginning of this year, and there are 254 involve sex trafficking. 163 involve the children age under 18. In total, 304 perpetrators were arrested. Prevention involves raising awareness and educating communities about the danger of trafficking. We work closely with NGOs, civil society, and international partners to implement education programs that power vulnerable population by fostering resilience and providing economic opportunities. We aim to reduce the risk factor that leads to trafficking. Suppression focuses on strengthening our law enforcement capability. We have established a specialized unit with the Royal Thai Police delegated to combating human trafficking. This unit are trained to investigate trafficking cases effectively, ensure the perpetrators are brought to justice. Our collaboration with international law enforcement agencies enhances our ability to break down the trafficking network. Punishment. The essential in holding traffickers accountable. Thailand has escalated and tightened the laws against human trafficking aligned with the international standards. We are committed to ensure that those who exploited others face severe penalty. A cornerstone of our effort in the National Referral Mechanism, which is called NRM. This framework facilitates cooperating among various agencies to ensure that victims receive comprehensive support. The NRM is designed to protect and assist survivors by providing them with access to essential services such as healthcare, legal assistance, and psychological support. It emphasizes a victim-centered approach, ensuring that victims are treated with dignity and respect throughout the recovery process, which is reporting, screening, referral, protection. In conclusion, Thailand is committed to preventing human trafficking through strong strategy that cover all prevention, suppression, punishment, and victim support via the national referral mechanism. Together with our international partners, we will continue to strengthen our efforts against this disgraceful crime. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Thailand for his statement. Now I'd like to give the floor to the representative of Morocco, followed by Mexico.
Thank you, Mr. President. At the outset, we would like to highlight the efforts made by the Kingdom of Morocco in participating in international efforts to combat the trafficking on persons. We have ratified UNTOC in 2002 and the protocol on the prevention, suppression, and punishment of trafficking of persons, especially women and children, in 2011. This was reflected in our national legislation through the adoption of Law 2714 in 2016 on combating trafficking in persons. We have worked to establish a national committee to coordinate efforts and measures to combat trafficking in persons in 2018 with a membership of 22 and has a mandate to monitor, to identify the victims of trafficking persons, as well as to work for developing measures for prevention, protection, and assistance towards voluntary return for victims that are foreigners. On the situation of the victims of trafficking persons, the legislator is keen to identify this category of victims throughout the legal process, and we are going to review some of the efforts made by Morocco in order to combat the trafficking of persons and to prevent it. For prevention and awareness raising, the National Committee in 2023 prepared a national plan to combat and prevent trafficking in persons covering the period 2023 to 2030, in addition to the strategic action plan for 2023-2026, in addition to the establishment of the national mechanism for the referral of the victims of trafficking in persons. At the level of reporting of trafficking and helping trafficking victims, the hotline was operationalized in order to report cases of trafficking, and that in order to celebrate the National Day for combating trafficking in persons, which is the 25th of July 2023, and that was organized as part of the Blue Heart initiatives. Also, the committee has set up a hotline for reporting of trafficking, and it is available to the public who wish to report cases of trafficking persons. Over 1,749 reports have been made through this hotline, and some of those reports concerned videos and photos involving children. At the level of early identification and monitoring of cases of trafficking in persons, a number of practical guides have been issued and prepared to help the professionals. And these include a guide to identification, a guide of legal applications, a glossary, and a guide for holding interviews for frontline responders. At the level of attending to the needs of the victims, over 300 social assistants work in the monitoring and assistance extension to the victims of trafficking. Also, the Kingdom of Morocco has set up an emergency shelter for women and children, and all those centers would provide essential services for the victims, especially medical, mental, social, and legal assistance. At the level of follow-up and combating the crime, we continue our cooperation internationally and also all the efforts to stop impunity. The number of people who have been prosecuted in 2023, according to our statistics, there was more than 171 defendants who were prosecuted through 110 court cases, and the number of possible victims was 190, and those who were officially identified as victims was 169. I thank you very much.
I thank the representative of Morocco for his statement. Now I would like to give the floor to the representative of Mexico, followed by the United States.
Mexico is a country committed to counteracting the trafficking in persons, shouldering with responsibility its commitment acquired in the international community to protect citizens as well as foreign nationals, migrants and those subject to international protection who are currently to be found in our country. We're aware that this effort requires a multidisciplinary approach in which the cooperation of all stakeholders needs to be carried out in a coordinated manner. In this regard, we have developed strategies which help us to identify, prevent and punish trafficking in persons related crimes. This includes a proposed reform to the general law on this topic, in which various instances of the federal public administration participate, along with non-governmental organizations, civil society, victims and survivors of crime, autonomous bodies and specialized international bodies. For my country, what is crucial is to prioritize the protection of the human rights of victims and ensure that there's clarity on defining the modalities for the correct punishment of the crime. Last June, in the state of Chiapas, a historical sentence was handed down in Mexico for the crime of trafficking in persons involving prostitution of another or other forms of sexual exploitation, especially to do with the crime of child pornography. The judge imposed 180 years of prison and a fine of more than 50 million pesos. This is the most severe sentence handed down in our country against a person for this kind of crime. In the international environment, we have developed the implementation of projects with various international bodies, including the project Accionar with the International Labour Organization. The aim is to combat child labour, forced labour and trafficking in persons. The project Solid Interventions to Combat Trafficking in Persons in Mexico 2023 to 2025 with the International Organization for Migration. The aim of this is to contribute to increasing identification and protection of victims of trafficking in persons, particularly in the context of migration. And the following three initiatives with UNODC, Agents of Change, to prevent and provide awareness raising on trafficking in persons and improving the capacity of local authorities and the staff of Indigenous and African-Mexican women's houses. The initiative Integrated Response Against Trafficking in Persons, the aim of which is to strengthen cooperation between federal entities and the Federation, the private sector and specialized shelters which provide care for people who are victims of crimes, and the initiative Disruption, Trafficking in Persons and Money Laundering, the aim of which is to promote investigation to identify resources which are proceeds of crime and trafficking in persons, and the links to the crime of money laundering. Thank you very much, President.
I thank the representative of Mexico for his statement. Now I would like to give the floor to the representative of the United States, followed by Norway.
The United States is pleased to take part in this discussion on implementation of the Trafficking in Persons Protocol. Over the last 2 years, we have prioritized survivor engagement by partnering with experts from the State Department's Human Trafficking Expert Consultant Network to develop and launch training resources on trauma-informed approaches. These resources provide essential information on engaging with survivors of human trafficking while minimizing the risk of re-traumatization. To better prevent forced labor and worker exploitation in temporary foreign worker programs, a task force convened by the White House released a report on enhanced protections within temporary foreign worker programs, updated trainings for embassy consular staff, improved workers' access to information about their rights, and increased workers' protections against exploitative conduct by employers. Since 2022, the United States has advanced implementation of the Not Invisible Act, a U.S. law passed to address the crisis of missing, murdered, and trafficked Indigenous Americans. The act established a commission comprising law enforcement, tribal leaders, federal partners, service providers, survivors, and family members of missing and murdered individuals. The commission held an unprecedented series of in-person field hearings priorities to inform its recommendations issued in 2023. The government responded by further detailing mechanisms to support individuals and communities affected by the crisis. During our chairmanship of the Organization of American States, completed last February, OAS member states adopted the organization's third anti-human trafficking work plan for the 2023 to 2028 timeframe and finalized new regional guidelines on the social inclusion of survivors, the first such guidelines adopted by a regional organization. Last month, the United States imposed sanctions on a Cambodian tycoon, his conglomerate, and 3 of his hotels for subjecting workers to forced labor in online investment scam operations. My office was pleased to lead this first ever effort to leverage global Magnitsky sanctions to increase accountability for human trafficking and other serious human rights abuses. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of the United States for her statement. And now I would like to give the floor to the representative of Norway, followed by Brazil.
Thank you, Chair. The conference background paper on UNODC's activities to promote the implementation of the protocol shows that the organization is supporting an impressive wide range of cooperation activities. Norway notes that UNODC in 2024 created a new global program on action against trafficking in persons and the smuggling of migrants by merging 2 separate existing programs. This seems a sensible approach, given the increasingly blurred lines between these criminal activities in many parts of the world. We welcome the many measures taken by UNODC to support countries in strengthening their criminal justice responses. It's impressive to hear about the project in southeastern Europe, where concrete trafficking in persons cases were analyzed and reviewed from early warnings to adjudication to provide a foundation for the development of training and stakeholder engagement, and again leading to the identification of a sizable number of victims. We warmly welcome UNODC's extensive cooperation with civil society organizations and the support for international and regional forums. International cooperation is vital, but demanding. There is a need to build structures able to meet current challenges, but also with the ability to face changing trends and times. Norway has been involved in several regional anti-trafficking initiatives as part of our efforts to prevent trafficking in line with the demands of the protocol. Government experts in the 10 member countries of the Council of the Baltic Sea States meet regularly to create and implement projects and share information on best practices. The success of this cooperation structure is dependent on a well-functioning secretariat and a willingness among members to engage in frank discussions. The expert group has a strong cooperation with civil society stakeholders. A recent project engaged journalists and journalist students in trainings and discussions on ways to report on trafficking cases and trends. What we describe as the 5 Nordic countries, Iceland, Denmark, Finland, Sweden, and Norway, have established a small working group of government coordinators. This group recently took steps to establish a new Nordic police network, responding to a clear wish from law enforcement experts. Several trafficking networks operate across the borders of the Nordic countries. Now, these mentioned regional initiatives are in a sense small scale, but results in this field does not depend on size. We recommend countries to establish cooperation structures that build on agreed and well-defined needs and with mandates that allow for a flexible approach to adopt quickly to new trends and challenges. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Norway for his statement, and now I would like to give the floor to the representative of Brazil, followed by Peru.
Mr. President, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, trafficking in persons undermines human dignity and poses a grave threat to the security and well-being of our societies. The crime affects millions of people around the globe, and the activity is persistent because it is profitable and directly linked to social, economic, racial, and gender inequalities, which leads of vulnerable groups accepting misleading and abusive proposals. Brazil reaffirms its unwavering commitment to combating human trafficking, one of the most serious forms of human rights violations, fully aligned with the provisions of the Palermo Convention and its additional protocols. Since it was promulgated by Brazil in March 2004, we have implemented a series of significant measures to ensure the effective application of its obligations under the Convention. Among these, I'd like to highlight the recent update of our 4th National Plan to Combat Trafficking in Persons, effective from 2024 to 2028, which addresses prevention, victim protection, accountability for perpetrators, and the strengthening of partnerships with civil society and international organizations. This plan serves as a robust and comprehensive strategy to combat trafficking through a role of government approach, ensuring the coordination of actions at the federal, state, and municipal levels. Brazil has also enhanced its legal framework to align with international standards, criminalizing a wide range of trafficking-related activities. These legislative measures prioritize the rights and dignity of victims, with particular attention to vulnerable groups such as women, children, migrants, and socially excluded. The expansion of specialized centers for victims assistance across the country provides comprehensive care, including legal, psychological, and social support, ensuring that victims are not only rescued, but reintegrated into society with dignity and safety. International cooperation continues to be a cornerstone of Brazil's approach to tackling human trafficking. We actively participate in bilateral and multilateral cooperation mechanisms, sharing intelligence, strengthening border security, and engaging in capacity building programs to enhance the skills of law enforcement officers in the detection, investigation, and prosecuting of trafficking crimes. Looking ahead, Brazil remains firmly committed to working with all member states, international organizations, and civil society to eradicate trafficking in persons. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Brazil for her statement. Now I would like to give the floor to the representative of Peru, followed by Paraguay.
Gracias, señor Presidente. Thank you, President. Distinguished delegates. Peru is a country which is firmly committed to the fight against transnational organised crime. For this reason, it actively participates in fora both at a universal and as well as a regional level in order to be able to tackle this phenomenon which causes so much damage to our populations, and particularly those who are in a particularly vulnerable situation. As also happens in other countries, the confluence of structural factors such as the persistence of poverty, economic inequality, informality in the economy and in the labour market, the development of the illegal economy, the increase in irregular migration, displacement and the eventual growth of criminal organisations inter alia generate conditions meaning that the crime of trafficking in persons becomes a very complex phenomenon which needs to be tackled from a human rights and intersectional based approach, given how vulnerable its victims are. In 2021, we approved a national policy to deal with trafficking in persons and its forms of exploitation by 2030. This is a document for comprehensive management which brings together the efforts of the Peruvian state to address the persistence of victimization to do with trafficking in persons, and it is also a significant contribution to tackle this crime which affects thousands of citizens, particularly women, girls, boys and adolescents. This policy has three priority objectives. Firstly, increasing preventive monitoring against trafficking in persons and their forms of exploitation in contexts of population who are at risk or vulnerable. Secondly, improving the functioning of the system to prosecute punish and enforce in order to combat the crime of trafficking in persons. And thirdly, it seeks to strengthen care for and the process of reintegration of people affected by the crime of trafficking in persons. In June of this year, the evaluation report of the National Policy for Trafficking in Persons was published. For 2023, we determined that we are at an intermediate level of implementation, but the commitment which has been shouldered to continue with cooperation with entities involved in the policy has been renewed in order to guarantee its implementation and comply with the goals which have been set. Finally, sir, we would like to highlight the efforts which have been carried out at a regional level against transnational organised crime, in particular against trafficking in persons. A demonstration of this was the adoption at the beginning of this year of the operative action plan of countries of the Andean community on transnational organised crime. This seeks to carry out joint work to identify, control and neutralise unauthorised border crossings in order to address illicit transnational activities. This includes trafficking in persons. Thank you very much, President.
I thank the representative of Peru for her statement. Now I would like to give the floor to the representative of Paraguay, followed by the State of Palestine.
Muchas gracias. Thank you, President. Regarding this subject, which affects women, children and teenagers in Paraguay most of all, this is a priority as we are a country of origin, but also transit and destination. Paraguay acknowledges that trafficking in persons is not an isolated event, but that it takes place in an organized way in many parts of our country, and this is just the beginning of international trafficking. We have a law since 2012, and this meant important progress with regards to an interinstitutional bureau to counter trafficking in persons made up of more than 15 institutions working on prevention, criminal prosecution and attention to victims. For prevention, we worked with awareness campaigns in the whole country on the implications of this crime, even in different languages, including indigenous languages. For criminal prosecution, we have specialized investigation units, and for assistance to victims, we have shelters for women who have been victims of trafficking. Internationally, we work closely with international agencies and bodies such as Spain's Cooperation Agency, UNODC, and the IOM for institutional capacity building. With the OAS, we've been working on a working plan for comprehensive responses to trafficking in persons in the Western Hemisphere. And then bilaterally, we work with joint operations and investigations focusing on entrance and exit points, both on land and in the air. Paraguay is working to update its national plan for 2025, the national program for preventing, combating, and caring for victims, and consular protocols against trafficking in persons. A possible challenge will be when the two-ocean road will be finished. We need to take this into account for trafficking in persons. Huge infrastructure projects have a big impact on the development of some regions or countries and have a positive impact for economic growth, but they're also a new scenario for organized crime. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Paraguay for her statement. Now I'd like to give the floor to the representative of the State of Palestine.
Thank you, Mr. President. We would like to indicate that the State of Palestine in 2017 has joined the protocol to prevent suppress and punish trafficking persons, especially women and children, the protocol that complements UNTOC. Amongst our important national legislations, there have been laws that have been promulgated under Law Number 6 for 2017 to organize the issue of the organ transplant and the law on Palestinian children, its amendments. Combating this crime is an ongoing effort for us. We have ratified a number of international agreements which have provisions and measures to combat the exploitation of persons, including the supplementary Convention against slavery and slavery-like practices, and which has been ratified in 2018. In our efforts to provide legislative protection against the trafficking persons in our Palestinian legislation, we have criminalized the trafficking in persons in a number of legislations, including the Penal Code, the Labor Law, and there is the law on the money laundering. This also has covered all cases of trafficking in persons in the Convention, whether those take place inside Palestine or outside the borders of Palestine. And despite everything that we have indicated and how the Palestinian legislation has addressed the question of trafficking persons, still legislative protection against the protection of persons in Palestine requires the promulgation of a specific law against the trafficking persons in line with the supplementary protocol of the UNTOC Convention. And therefore, the Committee for the Harmonization of Legislations that has been established recently after we have joined a number of instruments, this committee works on a law on trafficking in persons that has been amended recently, and the punishments will be rendered more severe for those who transgress under the terms of the Convention, in order also to ensure the combating of sexual exploitation of women and children. Also, the police will have a special unit to continue with this effort. You all know, sir, that the colonial Israeli occupation, the illegal colonial Israeli occupation, and the crimes perpetrated in the state of Palestine, especially the crime of genocide in the Gaza Strip for over a year, all this greatly affects the phenomenon of trafficking in persons and will lead to its increase. The wide-scale destruction and the economic collapse have led to the population being more and more vulnerable, including women and children in particular, and they become more liable to being exploited. You have the reports of the United Nations, which have shown how it has been a case where many minor girls have been married off because families sometimes find that this is one of the ways to resolve some of the extremely difficult economic conditions. Finally, the state of Palestine is very hopeful that it will receive all the assistance from the UNTOC in order to counter the crime of trafficking persons. I thank you.
I thank the representative of the State of Palestine for his statement. Now I would like to give the floor to the representative of Dominican Republic, followed by Senegal.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente. Thank you, President. Thank you for giving me the floor again, and greetings to all delegates. We will be referring to 2B and 2C of the agenda. The Dominican Republic has shown a strong commitment to the implementation of UNTOC and its protocols. We consider that these are essential tools for application inside member states and in consonance with their domestic law. I would like to talk about the progress we have made against trafficking in persons and smuggling of migrants. My government has undertaken initiatives and efforts to combat organized crime, especially trafficking in persons and smuggling of migrants. We have achieved this through an interinstitutional committee against trafficking in persons and smuggling of migrants under the auspices of the Foreign Ministry, but including different government organizations, international organizations, and civil society. Through this body, we have implemented 3 plans of action to prevent, prosecute, and protect. The most recent is the National Action Plan Against Trafficking in Persons and Smuggling of Migrants 2022-2024, which is being reviewed with the IOM. The results of that will guide us in the design of the 2025-2028 plan, which will enable us to continue to counter these serious crimes. We grant high priority to human rights, national security, and strengthening the legal framework against crime. Since 2021, we have worked closely with UNODC in bringing our national legislation into line, especially Law 13703 against trafficking in persons and smuggling of migrants. This law is comprehensive. It follows the guidelines of the Palermo Convention and more recent international guidelines and best practices. It also includes our accumulated best practice and experiences accumulated since Law 137 first came into force. I'd like to talk about some of our greatest achievements. For example, working on mobility with Cuba and Ecuador and underway with Colombia. That means we can work together combating the crimes and providing assistance to victims. We have also strengthened the protection of Dominicans abroad, victims of these crimes, thanks to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and our program of assistance to help them come back and be reintegrated. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the National Police have signed an agreement, actually just yesterday, to enable interoperability in the investigation of both crimes. That means we are taking a step forward to modernizing our institutions as we now have fluid exchange of information. To conclude, the Dominican Republic reaffirms its strong commitment to combating trafficking in persons and smuggling of migrants. We acknowledge the importance of a comprehensive approach, including international cooperation, strengthening of our institutions, and the protection of human rights. We shall continue to work decisively to adapt our institutions and protect human rights. Thank you very much, President.
Thank you for your statement. Now I would like to give the floor to the representative of Senegal, followed by the representative of Bangladesh.
Monsieur le Président.
President, distinguished delegates, Senegal reaffirms its firm commitment to combat trafficking in persons, a blight which is a threat to human dignity and social order. In line with its international and regional obligations, our country has adopted legislative reforms and specific measures to strengthen the framework for prevention, protection of victims, and prosecution of the perpetrators of this hateful crime. We now have a new law, 2005, 06 from 2005 on combating trafficking in persons, especially women and children. This law means we can prosecute criminal networks and provides better protection to victims, especially those who are vulnerable to domestic exploitation and the exploitation of children, smuggling of migrants. We also have dedicated structures such as the National Committee to Counter Trafficking in Persons. This is responsible for coordinating government actions and making the population aware of this phenomenon. In partnership with UNODC and NGOs, these efforts mean we've been able to make communities aware, identify and protect victims, and capacity build in our law enforcement agencies and justice institutions. Specific campaigns against forced begging have taken place, as well as campaigns against the sexual exploitation of children. We work closely with our international and regional partners, including ECOWAS and the African Union, to dismantle these transnational networks and to guarantee assistance to victims. The ratification of the Palermo Protocol is proof of our determination to contribute actively to global efforts to make better use of available legislation and instruments, we are currently reforming our legislation, and we need a global approach that includes combating poverty, improving education, and providing empowerment to vulnerable groups. These cross-cutting aspects have been taken into account by the government with its holistic approach. Those efforts have been acknowledged thanks to the recent report of the U.S. Department of State on combating trafficking in persons. We will continue to work for a society where human exploitation will no longer have a place. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Senegal for his statement, and now I'd like to give the floor to the representative of Bangladesh.
Thank you, Mr. President. Since ratifying in 2019, Bangladesh has made notable steps in implementing the Trafficking in Persons Protocol. The government has been collaborating with international organizations such as the UNODC and the IOM to strengthen our legal and institutional frameworks. Mr. President, we have enacted the Prevention and Suppression of Human Trafficking Act 2012. Implementing the law, we have established 7 dedicated anti-human trafficking offense tribunals. The current National Plan of Action for Prevention and Suppression of Human Trafficking 22 to 25 provides a comprehensive framework for prevention, protection, prosecution, and partnership to effectively counter trafficking in persons. Recently, we have established the National Referral Mechanism, which is giving traffic victims different services from return to repatriation and rehabilitation. Additionally, we have developed specialized manuals and tools for the law enforcement agencies, prosecutors, and judicial officers to enhance case handling and prosecution efforts. The government has also partnered with the NGOs and international bodies to create a holistic approach that includes not only criminal justice responses, but also preventive measures, victim rehabilitation, and awareness campaigns. With the technical support from the UNODC, the government under the GLOAC Bangladesh project has launched the first national study on trafficking in persons. Mr. President, the government also continuously conducts national awareness campaigns through print media, television, radio, and text messages. It also engages counter-trafficking committees from grassroots to the national levels, sometimes in partnership with civil society. Mr. President, Bangladesh stresses the importance of international partnership in providing technical assistance, capacity building, and financial support to developing countries in their fight against organized crime. Recently, through the GLOAC Bangladesh project, we are attempting to establish direct police-to-police cooperation with Costa Rica, Libya, and Malaysia in accordance with the UNTOC and TIP protocol. However, challenges remain in fully realizing the protocol's objectives. These include ensuring victim support services, dealing with issues like climate change, Rohingya crisis, poverty, and inequality that perpetuate trafficking, and tackling issues of cross-border trafficking that remain a significant concern in the region. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of Bangladesh for her statement, and this concludes the list of speakers of representatives of state parties to the convention. Now let me move to the list of speakers of our partners, international governmental organizations and NGOs, starting with Interpol. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Excellencies, distinguished delegates. In recent years, Interpol has observed a growing trend in the use of technology to facilitate trafficking in persons, particularly involving children and women. This evolution poses new challenges for law enforcement agencies worldwide. As part of Interpol's commitment to supporting the implementation of UNTOC, the organization provides robust technical tools and specialized expertise to disrupt international criminal networks involved in trafficking. Interpol coordinates and supports targeted operations to dismantle these criminal networks. A recent example is Operation Global Chain, which targeted cases of sexual exploitation, forced criminality, and forced begging. This large-scale joint operation conducted across 39 countries resulted in 219 arrests and identification of 1,374 potential victims, including 153 children. Interpol's dedication to preventing child trafficking is further demonstrated through its collaboration with international partners. In 2023, Interpol and UNICEF signed an agreement to support national governments in preventing and addressing online child sexual exploitation and abuse. This partnership focuses on supporting the establishment of specialized units to investigate such crimes, advancing training and professional development for law enforcement, and enhancing the use of Interpol's international child sexual exploitation database. As of today, Interpol's child sexual exploitation database holds 4.9 million images and videos and has helped identify 42,300 victims worldwide. Furthermore, Interpol's color-coded notice system plays a crucial role in tracking wanted traffickers. In July 2024, Interpol supported authorities in dismantling a criminal network involved in trafficking Colombian women to Mexico. Coordination between Specialized Prosecutor's Office, Investigative Police, and Interpol National Central Bureaus in Mexico and Colombia led to the arrest of network's leaders, provides the value and importance of international cooperation and information sharing through Interpol Red Notices. To conclude, Interpol remains committed to combating trafficking in persons through international cooperation and strategic partnerships to achieve the SGD target 8.7 and take immediate and effective measures to eradicate forced labor and modern slavery and human trafficking. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Interpol for his statement. Now, I would like to move to the list of speakers representing non-governmental organizations, starting with China Labor Watch. The floor is going to China Labor Watch.
谢谢主席，各位代表。
Thank you, Chairman. Distinguished delegates, members of the civil society, recent investments from multinational corporations in the Global South have supported developments in green energy, natural gas, metals, and minings, railway development, and real estate. Yet their investment and entry into these countries have also increased the risk of forced labor and human trafficking observed migrant workers. But for my organization's survey of workers in more than a dozen countries from 2021 to 2024, we found that many multinational companies recruit migrant workers and send them to mines or production factories in countries overseas where they have little access to support networks. While these workers arrive in a new country of employment, their passports are confiscated when arriving in a state. And employers employ methods to exit countries, such as hiring them without proper visa provision, restricting their freedom of movement and freedom of speech, requiring them to work overtime, withholding wages, not providing rest days, and isolating the workers from supporting networks. If these workers wish to resign, they will be charged high liquidated damages and will be denied medical care for their illness or injuries. As a result, many workers live and work in poor conditions with insufficient labor protection and safety equipment and no reasonable complaints and rights protection mechanism. So if they join or organize protests about their working conditions, will be punished. The situation of female workers is even more precarious. They are victims of human trafficking in transnational investment and targets of sexual oppression by managers of these project investment companies. I hope that the state parties will step up investigation into human trafficking activities by multinational corporations to enact or enforce laws to hold companies accountable for illegal activities and to strengthen bilateral and national coordination to effectively prevent human trafficking and forced labor. Thank you.
I wish to thank the representative of China Labor Watch for his statement, and now I would like to give the floor to the representative of Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime, followed by Kadira Foundation.
Chair, Excellencies, colleagues,
I'm making this statement on behalf of the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime, the UNTOC, to highlight how technology and private sector engagement can enhance the implementation of the Trafficking in Persons Protocol. Technology is a key part of traffickers' methods, from digital communication to recruitment to the use of cryptocurrency to transfer of illicit funds. Digitalization is embedded in our lives, making it challenging to create legislation that limits its use without affecting development. However, technology can also be a powerful tool to combat human trafficking. UNTOC, in partnership with the Tech Against Trafficking Initiative, which is the first business-led initiative to address human trafficking, has conducted research on technology tools used globally to address human trafficking. Our flagship initiative is the landscape mapping of anti-human trafficking tech tools, which provides comprehensive data on existing tools categorized by features such as tool types, sector focus, and types of trafficking. The key takeaways from the landscape analysis as of now, October 2024, shows that the focus areas, the majority of the tools target labor trafficking, 48%, and sex trafficking, with a small proportion addressing other forms of human trafficking. User and beneficiary groups are outlined, so we see that businesses, victims, and law enforcement are the primary users, with businesses utilizing 46% of the tools and potential victims being the most represented beneficiaries. When looking at the tool types, their victim trafficker identification tools represent the largest category by 23%, followed by awareness, education, and collaboration tools. Looking at the geographical gaps, there is a significant disparity in tool availability across the regions. So with North America and Europe having the most tools, while MENA and Oceania remaining under-resourced, particularly addressing sex trafficking. The technology advancements shows that proprietary technologies dominate, with 84% of tools requiring licenses. So open access, open source tools make up a small portion of the landscape, highlighting limited public accessibility and customization options. So through our partnership also with the OSCE, a new report will be soon published, providing an in-depth analysis of existing and newly added tools. This publication aims to connect stakeholders and deepen the understanding of how technology can prevent and combat human trafficking. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime for her statement, and now I'd like to give the floor to the Kadira Foundation.
Distinguished President, Your Excellencies, Honorable Delegates, ladies and gentlemen, Namaste Bharat. At the outset, I would like to express my sincere congratulations on your election to the chair. Today, we have all gathered here to deliberate on the pressing issues that threaten global security and peace, such as transnational organized crimes, including but not limited to human trafficking, migrant smuggling, cybercrimes. COP12 offers a crucial platform to address these challenges. I take this opportunity to introduce myself to the esteemed President, delegates, and distinguished guests. I am Advocate Tanya Jha, representing Kadira Foundation, an organization from Mumbai, India, working with survivors of trafficking, women, and children from economically disadvantaged communities, focusing on legal aid services and providing access to healthcare. As a representative of civil society, we recognize the critical role of the UNODC in fostering international cooperation, meaningful dialogues, and promoting effective policies to combat transnational organized crimes. President, our organization has extensively worked with the survivors of trafficking since India is transit and final destination for human trafficking and migrant smuggling. It is not out of place to mention that Mumbai is home to Asia's biggest red light district, popularly known as Kamatipura. According to the National Crime Records in India, 76% of all the victims trafficked in India are women and girls, and they are trapped in the cycle of modern-day slavery and forced sex workers. Economic inequality, poverty, and a lack of education among women and children from economically disadvantaged regions are the core reason for they fall prey to these heinous crimes. Convergence of trafficking with cyber crimes and money laundering aggravates these issues. While India has taken significant steps by establishing anti-trafficking units in every state and district, and have drafted the Trafficking of Persons Prevention, Protection and Rehabilitation Bill of 2021, and to tackle money laundering, it has legislation called the Prevention of Money Laundering Act 2002. However, President, the delays in prosecution and delays in trials in the accused person, waiting for years for cases to be tried and concluded, which calls for judicial reformation for speedy dispersal of such cases and convictions. Thank you, President. We urge that the implementation of the protocol on transnational crimes must be supported by advocate resources for grassroots organization, awareness programs at community level, increased funding, enhancement of law enforcement collaborations, active participation of private sector, and access to justice for all. Thank you, Chair.
I thank the representative of Kadira Foundation for her statement, and this concludes the list of speakers from NGOs. I was just informed that one member state, Cambodia, is requesting to speak under this item 2B, so I would like to give the floor to Cambodia.
I thank you so much, Excellency President. Cambodia would like to reaffirm the strong commitment to combat trafficking in persons since we signed and ratified the Convention and its protocol to punish human trafficking in 2005 and 2007 consecutively. Cambodia has developed and adopted the local law of suppression human trafficking and sexual exploitation in 2008, which rely on the protocol. Besides that, the national mechanism was established as a national committee for counter-trafficking in persons, led by the Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of the Ministry Interior, which combined all relevant ministries as a member and involved officials from national to sub-national level to prevent prosecution and law enforcement, victim protection, and mobilize all sectors in country, civil society, private sector, religious body, as well as the international arena to join hands to combat trafficking in persons. Strategic and implementation plan to combat trafficking in persons have been established consecutively since 2011, and recently we launched the strategic plan for 2024 to 2028. Some laws have been put into force to support the anti-trafficking law, including the Criminal Code, the Procedure of the Kingdom of Cambodia, Law of Anti-Money Laundering, Law on Juvenile Justice, and still on the process of adoption, the Law on Child Protection, and so on. Cambodia has also developed the national guideline for victim identification for appropriate support provision in 2015, and it is on the review process to respond to a new form of trafficking crime. To collaborate with the relevant countries, Cambodia have signed bilateral and multilateral memorandum of understanding, agreement, and SOPs with countries in the sub-region and region and internationally to ensure the collaboration to respond effectively trafficking in persons. Excellency President, what we have learned for many years from the implementations of the Convention, Protocol, and laws as compared with the fact, we learned that the trafficking over labor force in migrant, especially among undocumented migrants working in fishing industry, the infant trafficking via surrogacy method, and the combination of the crime with the high technology for communication are very serious. and need to be considering on the identifying a real victim to be assisted and the real perpetrator to be punished, as the crime is very complicated. Recently, Cambodia authorities have led a group of 20 women from Philippines and 4 from Vietnam who have implanted for surrogacy in Thailand and sent to Cambodia for taking care of pregnancy before trafficking the baby to somewhere else. As Cambodia against surrogacy and human trafficking, we are ready to work with Philippine and Thailand authorities to investigate and punish perpetrators. Cambodia supports strongly all initiatives to improve the effectiveness of the elimination of trafficking in persons, and we urge all countries to have stronger collaboration to support each other to combat common evil. Thank you so much, sir.
I thank the representative of Cambodia for her statement, and we have now concluded the list of speakers for item 2B. Let's move to agenda item 2C. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to invite the conference to turn its attention to agenda item 2C, entitled Protocol Against the Smuggling of Migrants by Land, Sea and Air. In order to facilitate its consideration, the conference has before it the following. So I apologize. I was just informed that one more speaker is requesting the floor under agenda item 2B, and it's the Organization of American States. So I would like to reopen the discussion for item 2B and give the floor to the representative of the Organization of American States, and then we'll move to the agenda item 2C. So the floor is yours.
Gracias, señor presidente. Buenos días a todos y todas. En nombre de la organización.
On behalf of the Organization of American States, we reaffirm our commitment to complying with UNTOC and its 3 protocols, and we support our member states in preventing and mitigating the impact of trafficking in persons at all levels. In terms of programs, we support member states in the region in developing specific legislation on trafficking in persons in line with international standards. We also support the design of mechanisms and road maps, guidebooks, protocols and operational procedures, as well as the implementation of projects that take on board attention to the most vulnerable communities in terms of trafficking persons, women, children, indigenous communities, and people of different sexual identities. The development of technical capacities of more than 10,000 professionals in the public sector and in civil society has been important. We've also carried out exercises to improve the training of law enforcement agencies, and we've worked on local committees to strengthen community actions to prevent this crime and to protect victims. In political terms, we act as a technical secretariat of the Meeting of National Authorities on Smuggling in Persons, and that led to the 3rd working plan for comprehensive responses to trafficking in persons. This process began under Argentina's presidency and was completed under the presidency of the United States. The third plan from 2023 to 2028 reflects emerging trends and main concerns of member states, such as tackling trafficking in persons with comprehensive strategies related to other crimes and types of violence. It refers to the use of technology to recruit victims, but also to combat the crime. There are initiatives to ensure that the public sector also plays its role. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the Organizations of American States for his statement, and I was informed by the Secretariat that Israel is asking for giving them the opportunity to exercise the right of reply. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to express my concern regarding the inflammatory language and blood libels by the Palestinian Authority delegation in this forum. This while, despite the passage of more than a year, the Palestinian Authority has never once condemned the horrific massacre of October 7th. The Palestinian Authority, that has been in office for 18 years, also pays stipends to terrorists, including Hamas murderers and their families, according to the number of Jews that they killed. On a separate note, I would like to reiterate Israel's ongoing commitment to combating human trafficking, particularly in relation to the trafficking of organs and its work in the international arena to prevent the misuse of organ transplant routes worldwide. We're dedicated to continuing our cooperation with other countries in this regard. We remain open to sharing our best practices. I thank you, Mr. Chair.
I thank the representative of Israel for her statement, and now I close finally the list of speakers for agenda item 2B, and I would like to remind to everybody that we have enough time during the session to inscribe into the list of speakers, so please do it on a timely basis as not to reopen discussion on the different items. So let's move back to agenda item 2C. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to invite the conference to turn its attention to agenda item 2C, entitled Protocol Against the Smuggling of Migrants by Land, Sea and Air. In order to facilitate its consideration, the conference has before it the following documentation: a report prepared by Secretariat entitled Report of the Secretariat on the Activities of the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime to promote and support the implementation of the Protocol against the smuggling of migrants by land, sea and air, supplementing the United Nations Convention against Transnational Organized Crime, CTOC/COP/2024/3. The note by the Secretariat transmitting the reports on the meetings of the working group on the smuggling of migrants held in Vienna on 5th and 6th October 2023 and on 11th and 12th July 2024, CTOC/COP/2024/5. And finally, the conference room paper by the Secretariat on the co-chair's summary of the discussion of the constructive dialogue held on 15th July 2024, following the conclusion of the CTOC/COP/2024/CRP.3. Under this agenda item, the conference will hear introductory remarks by the Secretariat. And I'm also glad to announce that under this item, Mr. Francesco Testa of Italy, one of the co-chairpersons of the working group on the smuggling of migrants at its 11th session held in Vienna from 11th to 12th July this year, and of the subsequent constructive dialogue on the review mechanism, will speak about the work of the working group and introduce its report. He will deliver his statement also on behalf of the co-chair, Mr. Vasilis Kakosimu of Greece. However, I was informed ahead of time that Mr. Testa is unavailable between noon and 1 p.m. today, and for this reason, even if we would exhaust our list of speakers for item 2C before we break for lunch, we'll leave the item open to enable Mr. Testa to address the conference at the beginning of the next meeting. I would like now to invite Mr. Martin Fouquet of the Human Trafficking and Migrant Smuggling section of UNODC to introduce the item to the conference. Mr. Fouquet, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to introduce this agenda item. Distinguished representatives, since the last conference of the parties, the number of states parties to the Smuggling of Migrants Protocol has risen to 152, underscoring the commitment of a growing number of states to address this crime. However, despite the increased level of ratification, implementation remains challenging. Migrant smuggling is increasingly and globally an issue of concerns linked to migration and refugee flows from conflict and instability. There is resultingly a consistent demand from stakeholders for solid evidence, technical assistance, and policy guidance. Between 2022 and 2024, UNODC provided related technical assistance to 60 states, reaching more than 9,000 practitioners. At the legislative and policy level, the office assisted, for example, the Comoros in enacting a new law to counter the smuggling of migrants, and also provided legislative support to Bangladesh, Iraq, Kyrgyzstan, Malawi, Pakistan, Somalia, South Sudan, and CARICOM to address this crime. Under its new Action Against Human Trafficking and Migrant Smuggling, UNODC developed new initiatives to support countries of origin, transit, and destination to interact with each other, to establish effective communication channels, and create a common understanding of the forms and manifestations of migrant smuggling. To this end, UNODC implemented projects such as StarSOM to help countries improve investigations and prosecutions while reducing risks for smuggled persons. Through this particular initiative, UNODC has trained and mentored over 900 experts from 14 countries in Latin America, South Asia, and Africa. Similarly, under the GLOACT initiative, UNODC supported countries in Central, South, and West Asia to develop strategies and legal frameworks, foster closer international cooperation, and improve protection and assistance for smuggled migrants. In addressing smuggling of migrants, UNODC works with other international organizations, including Interpol. Under our joint project Turquesa, implemented in Latin America and the Caribbean, the two organizations provided specialized mentoring support to 32 prosecutors and law enforcement officials from 18 countries in the Latin American region, 56% of whom were women. The mentoring focused on enhancing knowledge of advanced criminal investigation methods, including the use of new technologies. UNODC further enhances knowledge development and management efforts including through the Sherlock case database, which now contains 831 migrant smuggling cases from 46 jurisdictions. Data collection and analysis are an essential basis for sound anti-smuggling responses. Through the Observatory on Smuggling of Migrants, UNODC provides up-to-date evidence on the modus operandi of smugglers, smuggling routes, fees, and abuses along the process. The Observatory, for example, has analysed routes in West Africa, North Africa, and the Central Mediterranean, with findings supporting the conclusion that the smuggling of migrants is largely a demand-driven crime. Mr. President, in 2023 and 2024, UNODC provided Secretariat services to the 10th and 11th meetings of the Intergovernmental Working Group on the Smuggling of Migrants. During these meetings, 28 recommendations were adopted by state parties. They encouraged, amongst others, the strengthening of international cooperation and the provision of technical assistance, especially regarding the abuse of digital tools by migrant smuggling criminal networks. The working group meetings also stressed the need to fundamentally protect and promote the rights of smuggled migrants in line with the protocol and increase related prevention measures. At the technical cooperation level, and in response to state parties' requests, UNODC will, in the remainder of 2024 and throughout 2025, prioritize assistance against illicit financial flows deriving from smuggling operations, and also building understanding of cyber-related, cyber-enabled migrant smuggling. New programs are expected to be launched in Latin America, as well as in South and West Asia, against these specific elements of the crime. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Fogg, for your introductory statement. I now would like to open the floor for statements under this agenda item, and I would like to give the floor to the first speaker under this agenda item, to representative of Canada, followed by Colombia. Then I was informed that Canada will not be taking the floor, so the next speaker is the representative of Colombia. Colombia, the floor is yours.
Gracias.
Thank you, President. For Colombia, the priority is to strengthen international cooperation for safe, orderly and regular migration, which allows us to comprehensively address the trafficking, smuggling of migrants. As we've said in various multilateral fora and regional fora, migratory flows are ever more complex, and crimes such as smuggling of migrants increase the vulnerability of people and communities as they transit from one state to another. That is why we reiterate the importance of shared responsibility when it comes to addressing this phenomenon. To respond to the migratory flow and connected crimes such as smuggling of migrants, what is required is that actions implemented by states incorporate a human rights-based approach with an emphasis on care for boys, girls and adolescents, considering their best interest, independent of their migratory status. This is with the aim of mitigating the risk of exploitation by traffickers. To prevent smuggling of migrants, we need to recognise the structural causes which lead to people leaving their place of origin. These include poverty, inequality, unemployment, violence, climate change and other factors. These are exploited by smugglers who turn this human tragedy into an opportunity to do business at the cost of the most vulnerable. We call from a vision of shared responsibility for prioritisation of essential aspects such as recognition of rights to access to justice and due process, in addition to the civil rights of any migrant person, independent of their migratory status. Thank you, President.
Thank you, distinguished delegate from Colombia. Now I would give the floor to China, to be followed by South Africa. China, you have the floor. I see that the distinguished representative of China did not ask for the floor. So according to the list of speakers, we would give to the subsequent speaker, which is South Africa, the delegation of South Africa. You may take the floor.
I think you just scroll down. Okay. Because we start from here. So this next is Tanzania.
So we continue, we carry on the speakers list. Now the delegation of Tanzania, you may take the floor on this item.
Thank you, Mr. President and distinguished delegates. The United Republic of Tanzania has signed this protocol on 13th December 2000 and ratified it on 24th May 2006. Our legal and regulatory framework has been pressed to create a conducive environment to execute the protocol by incorporating in the Tanzania Immigration Act, Chapter 54 of 2016, the following section to criminalize smuggling offenses. Specifically, Section 46 stipulates that a person who smuggles immigrants, hosts illegal immigrants, transports illegal immigrants, finances, organizes, or aids the smuggling of immigrants, or facilitates in a way the smuggling of immigrants into the United Republic of Tanzania or to a foreign country, commits any fraudulent act, or makes any false representation by conducting statements or otherwise to enter into, remaining, or departing from, or facilitating, or assisting the entrance into, resides in or departing from the United Republic of Tanzania, or transports any prohibited immigrants within the United Republic of Tanzania, commits an offense and on conviction is liable to a fine of not less than 20 million shillings or imprisonment for a term of 20 years. Mr. President, understanding the nature and sensitivity of the matter, United Republic of Tanzania has since the inception of this protocol and after its ratification in 2006, it has implemented it to the following extent. Creating the offense of smuggling of migrants, the above provision captures the entire smuggling continuum, such that any engagement in one of the stages of the smuggling is sufficient to create criminal liability. Also, a person or group of persons may be held liable for different offenses of smuggling in persons. To establish the offense of smuggling of migrants, that shall include illegal entry into or illegal exit from the Republic of Tanzania, hosting, financing, or organizing smuggling, facilitating smuggling, transporting of illegal or prohibited immigrants, commits of any fraudulent acts to facilitate legal entry in Tanzania. The above section also differentiates smuggling from acts of human trafficking. However, smuggling of migrants are charged under Section 45. Tanzania has, though, in its initiative, established the National Identification Authority, NIDA, which is responsible for the registration of issuance of national identity cards to Tanzanian citizens and legal residents. The government has also created the electronic passport system to capture biometric features and fingerprints and facial identification that has helped in dealing with smuggling. Moreover, Immigration Department has created awareness by establishing their offices and having their officers at the local level, at local community level, who are dealing with immigration issues. Mr. President, due to its geographical location, and despite the amendment of its legal frameworks to allow citizens from the Horn of Africa to pass through the United Republic of Tanzania, is still facing the challenge of smuggled migrants through Tanzania to South Africa and beyond. In conclusion, Mr. President, Tanzania continues to congratulate member states to this protocol for devoting their efforts, both technical and financial, in assisting one in fighting this crime. We further encourage all other member states to do so, as fighting transnational organized crimes could be well attained through joint efforts. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the distinguished representative of Tanzania for his statement. Now I give the floor to the representative of Indonesia, to be followed by Algeria. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President. Indonesia also emphasized the importance of the implementation of the smuggling of migrant protocol. Having recognized migration's long-standing positive contribution to sustainable development, Indonesia is committed to multilateral efforts which promote the establishment of corridors for safe, regular, and orderly migration. If we all agree on the critical importance of protecting the rights of migrants and their family, we believe we can achieve safe, regular, and orderly migration. In this regard, protecting the rights of Indonesian migrants, irrespective of their migration status, remains our top national priority. Mr. President and distinguished delegates, Indonesia wishes to share that from 2022 to 2024, the government has handled 16 smuggling cases that involve almost 1,900 victims. As we have witnessed, the rise of digital platforms has significantly changed the conduct of people smuggling operations. Smugglers now leverage social media using online platforms to recruit victims and facilitate their activities. Indonesia, with its geographically strategic location in the Asia-Pacific region, is utilized by criminals as a transit point, which in some cases lures Indonesian traditional fishermen to transport and smuggle the victims, crossing dangerous seas with ships that are not seaworthy. This situation calls for immediate intervention, including but not limited to the need to increase the quality of border control and strong prevention measures. Mr. President and distinguished delegates, to reduce and prevent smuggling crimes, Indonesia has fortified its immigration capabilities in monitoring and screening migrants and travelers at border posts and enhancing the border and management technology system. Nevertheless, as smuggling of migrants is a complex transnational organized crime, we believe eradicating such crime requires concerted effort by the countries of origin, transit, and destination in a spirit of burden sharing and shared responsibility. Finally, noting that jurisdictional boundaries often challenge our work and cooperation, we call for stronger law enforcement agencies, whether through bilateral, regional, and multilateral frameworks, to bridge those differences and find durable solutions. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Indonesia for his statement. Now I give the floor to Algeria, to be followed by Belarus. You have the floor.
In the name of God, most gracious, most merciful, Algeria accords great importance to the phenomenon of migration and the way it's connected to development, as well as all the relevant challenges that we need to tackle given the reality of that phenomenon in Algeria. This is compounded by the latest tragedies, challenges on all levels, specifically structural imbalances in development courses of many countries, as well as economic deterioration, the lack of security stability, and numerous conflicts that feed into terrorism and organized crime, in addition to climate change, which negatively impacts development and the social construct. Ladies and gentlemen, Algeria has undertaken a number of efforts on several levels by assisting poor states and engaging in strong relations and cooperation with the Interpol in order to arrest the convicted individuals. On the internal level, we have tackled illegal migration, and we have worked on combating this phenomenon with a number of local laws in accordance with our local and international obligations. In Algeria, on a practical level, in 2021, we have established the Central Authority Against Organized Crime that tackles all forms of organized crimes, including the smuggling of migrants. In 2022, we have established the Central Office on Smuggling of Migrants that oversees 61 task forces working on an ad hoc basis all over Algeria in order to confiscate and deliver assets. The Central Authority Against Cyber Crimes, with all its task forces in Algeria, is actively working on tracking all publications and accounts that contribute to the smuggling of migrants in order to take the necessary legal measures against them. In the same vein, and in order to dry up the sources of funding of these criminals, we conduct parallel investigations related to illegal migration. And when it comes to regional and international cooperation, we are part of many international agreements like the Palermo Convention, and we collaborate with the EU states and other neighboring states in order to reinforce border control and to exchange intelligence. We collaborate with UNODC and other players in order to provide necessary trainings for officers of the law and for the sake of sensitization, using all of the available means in order to curb this phenomenon. In conclusion, I would like to reiterate that we fully believe in the need of establishing comprehensive approaches in order to deal with the root causes of smuggling of migrants, including to work on better socioeconomic development, shrinking poverty levels, and providing greater job opportunities, and to collaborate with member states in order to organize the orderly channels of migration. Thank you.
To the delegation of Belarus, to be followed by Angola. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, President. We note the important role of UNODC in assisting states in implementing the protocol. We appreciate the activities of the Working Group on Smuggling of Migrants, which considers various issues to do with the implementation of the protocol. We think that it is important to fully implement all recommendations developed by this working group. Migration issues, including counteracting illegal migration, are paid particular attention in Belarus. In 2024, the government approved a concept for migration policy 2024-2028, one of the tasks of which is to counteract illegal migration. There is consistent work being carried out to improve regulations in the area of migration. In 2019 to 2020, changes were made to Belarusian legislation with regard to holding the illegal migrants in temporary foreign national holding centres and the functioning of such centres, and also medical treatment there. Belarus closely cooperates with the representatives of UNHCR and the IOM and the Belarusian Red Cross. The competent authorities of Belarus constantly carry out preventive and other measures aimed at identifying and eliminating illicit migration channels. When it comes to all documented cases against organisers and persons abetting illicit migration, the initial investigative authorities have opened criminal cases in all these cases. In 2022, there were 49 criminal cases. In 2023, there were 89 criminal cases. Since 2021, when Belarus first encountered a growing uncontrolled inflow of migrants, there has been a difficult situation on the western border. Belarus took the necessary measures to minimize negative impact of this, including in the interests of asylum seekers. Visits to the state border were organized for representatives of leading and specialized international organizations and corresponding structures of the EU. Shelters were created for migrants in Belarus. Visa restrictions were introduced and flights organized as part of repatriation programs. In 2020 to 2021, 19 groups of illicit migrants, numbering 78 people, were detained. In 2022 to 2023, we saw a sharp increase in numbers. In 2022, in Belarus, 163 groups comprising 1,099 migrants were detected. In 2023, 596 groups amounting to 3,931 people. Over the 9 months of this year, we detected 307 groups comprising 2,137 people. These and other measures undertaken allowed us, in this regard, to reduce the number of illegal migrants who reach the territory of EU countries to the 2020 level and lower. So, our actions are very effective, and having a a big impact, especially for countries of the EU. But at the same time, in the current context, taking into account the curtailed border cooperation with neighbouring countries, Belarus cannot fully assist countries of the European Union in protecting them from migrant flows, as was previously the case. Resolving this problem can be done only through comprehensive efforts and only through cooperation of all involved parties. This year, the UN General Assembly declared the 15th of November to be the International Day for the Prevention of and Fight Against All Forms of Transnational Organised Crime. On that day, in Minsk, there will be an international conference on measures undertaken in the Republic of Belarus to counteract illegal migration and the positive experience of developing regional cooperation in resolving this problem. The aim of this conference will be to draw up proposals on constructive cooperation between interested parties in order to ensure migration flows across the eastern border is orderly. We hope that all parties interested in normalising the situation on the border will participate in this conference. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Belarus for his statement. Now I give the floor to Angola, to be followed by Turkmenistan. Angola, you have the floor.
Mr. President, the Republic of Angola recognized the effort of the international community in implementing UNTOC, and the fight against the smuggle of migrants requires international cooperation to achieve the objective of the Convention. Angola has been facing challenge in combating the smuggle of migrants, as its strategic geographical position, combined with the instability in certain regions of southern Africa, has made the country a frequent transit point of migrant smuggling networks. For these reasons, and with the aim of implementing the protocol against the smuggle of migrants, the National Observatory of Combating Illegal Immigration, Exploitation, and illicit traffic of the strategic mineral resources was recently created. Furthermore, several strategic measures have been adopted to strengthen its capacity to combat smuggling of migrants. In partnership with international organizations, it has reinforced border control, improved the security of travel documents, and enhanced protection mechanisms of victims. Angola has strengthened land border control in collaboration with the neighboring countries such as the Republic of Congo, Democratic Republic of Congo, Zambia, and Namibia with the joint operation, as well as with international organizations and agencies, including the Southern Africa Development Community and Interpol. Border posts have also been reinforced along the main illegal migration routes, particularly in the North land borders. Regarding maritime surveillance, Angola Border Guard Police has intensified patrol action along the coast, especially in critical areas such as the coastal zones. Likewise, the efforts related to the prevention and fight against illegal migration have resulted in detention and deportation of several foreign citizens in irregular situations, a considerable number of entry refusals to foreigners attempt to illegally enter in Angola territory, a considerable number of attempts to leave the national territory were prevented, many of which involve minors without proper parental authorization, a crucial action to ensure the protection of vulnerable children. Similarly, in partnership with international agencies, Angola implements an intensive training program of security and migration officers. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Thank you for the distinguished representative of Angola. Now I would give the floor to the delegation of Turkmenistan, to be followed by France. Turkmenistan, you have the floor.
President, ladies and gentlemen, we read the Secretariat's report. This report contains information about leading practices and problems when it comes to tackling smuggling of migrants, and it talks about technical assistance and the activities of UNODC in assisting in implementing this protocol. In order to increase the effectiveness of transnational measures to counteract smuggling of migrants and encountering trafficking in persons, Turkmenistan joined the UN Convention Against Transnational Organised Crime and the protocol. From the moment of accession and to date, Turkmenistan has not registered a single case of smuggling of migrants. Nevertheless, in accordance with its national plan to counteract trafficking in persons, the activity of national services is aimed on preventing and stopping crimes in this category. When it comes to exchanging information and data about illicit migration, trafficking in persons, including routes for illicit smuggling, methods of work and vulnerability factors of the illicitly smuggled migrants, Turkmenistan cooperates with foreign countries and international organizations. In the context of counteracting smuggling of migrants and trafficking in persons, we are studying successful strategies for implementing technological means, ICTs, and to prevent and investigate cases of smuggling of migrants and to effectively respond to the increased activities of criminal groups in cyberspace. We are improving legislation in accordance with international standards, strengthening our capacity through systematic training of officers of law enforcement and other authorized bodies, and the population is informed about risks and dangers. In the context of border management in Turkmenistan, a set of strategies are being taken to counteract trans-border crime. We're improving travel documents, identifying persons in mixed migration flows. We're equipping the borders with modern equipment, and we're improving the system for border registration. Border crossing points on our national border are equipped with modern technology, electronic gates, and similar to those used in other countries, state borders to be crossed. We're also improving our border management by introducing an API system. Over the recent period, since a number of conferences has been held and training seminars and trainings with the participants of specialists of state bodies and representatives of international organizations, and civil society bodies have also facilitated in improving means and ways of coordinating actions to counteract smuggling of migrants and trafficking in persons. I would like to take this opportunity to express our gratitude for the high level of organization of this conference, and I'd like to wish all participants at this event successful and fruitful work. I thank you.
Thank you, the distinguished representative of Turkmenistan. Maintenant, je donne la parole à...
And now I give the floor to France, followed by Venezuela. France, you have the floor. Thank you, President, delegates. France associates itself to the statement made by the European Union and would like to make the following comments in its national capacity. Migrants leave their countries because of serious problems, but every year there are many deaths all over the world. These deaths are the result of criminal activities of the smugglers who exploit the situation of distress and endanger the lives of others. In order to combat this crime, France reiterates its attachment to the protocol against the smuggling of migrants by land, air and sea. This protocol means we can prevent and counter smuggling and promote cooperation between states parties and protect the rights of migrants. We therefore call on all states to ratify and fully implement the protocol. We believe that our response has to be just as transnational as the smuggling. We have to lead a decisive fight against the networks of smugglers, either in countries of departure, transit or destination. We must increase our joint efforts to identify and prosecute the members of the networks. France, in partnership with international organizations and third-party states, to work for safe, orderly and regular migration whilst preserving human rights and the dignity of migrants. Moreover, criminal groups involved in smuggling are increasingly involved in other crimes. We therefore have to analyze and combat this polycriminality in order to dismantle the groups, prosecute them and convict them. As an example, France has supported the production of a report by UNODC, and we are grateful to them for their work on links between smuggling of migrants and other forms of organized crime on itineraries in the central and western Mediterranean. Thank you.
Je vous remercie, Madame, pour votre
Thank you for your statement.
Or to Venezuela, to be followed by Peru. Venezuela, you have the floor.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, President. The smuggling of migrants is one of the most devastating and cruel phenomena to affect the most vulnerable people in the world. Thousands of men, women and children fall into the hand of smugglers with the promise of a better future, but they end up stuck in a cycle of violence, abuse and exploitation. This means that in countries such as Venezuela, with an economic war imposed on our country through illegal and criminal unilateral coercive measures, which have undermined the opportunities and resources for many families. Given this reality, Venezuela wants to create economic opportunities in our country, protecting our citizens and preventing them from falling into the hands of criminals. In this context, smuggling of migrants is something used not to improve the lives of people, but as a political maneuver to create vulnerability. Criminals use this situation to exploit human misery and obtain financial benefits through the smuggling of migrants. This crime is not just linked to exploiting people, it also feeds into illicit financial flows which end up in the hands of transnational criminal organizations. Venezuela has the Return to the Motherland program, which has brought back thousands of migrants who gave in to empty promises. Restrictive and xenophobic migratory policies that criminalize migrants are counterproductive and only lead to citizens using smugglers. As we have said, this exacerbates the situation and victims are additionally exploited. It is essential for international efforts to focus on the underlying causes of migration and promote social justice and respect for human rights. International cooperation and technical assistance are key to complying with the aims of UNTOC and its protocols. And it should be based on impartiality and not selectiveness. Venezuela defends multilateralism and believes that this cooperation should be directed at structural, sustainable solutions. President, international cooperation is the only effective way to solve this global problem. Venezuela promotes dialogue between countries of origin, transit and destination to protect migrants and to deal with the causes of smuggling. We need comprehensive solutions with safe and regular ways for migration and family reunification. Only through global cooperation can we guarantee that migrants are not treated as merchandise by these criminals. Thank you.
Now I give the floor to Peru, to be followed by the United States. The delegation of Peru, you have the floor.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, President. Distinguished delegates, with regards to the protocol to combat smuggling of migrants, which is in addition to UNTOC, I will refer to what Peru has been doing in its action plan against transnational organized crime in the Andean community. In recent decades, Peru and members of the Andean community have suffered significant migratory flows, both internally and externally, which have had an impact on security and other aspects of life in our region. One of the consequences of this migratory flow has been seen in the presence of transnational organized criminal groups linked to smuggling of persons and smuggling of migrants and trafficking in persons, among other things. We need joint action to combat this and to increase security. The existence of these criminal groups has led to violence in Ecuador in 2021, and then Peru took the initiative and called a meeting of the Andean Council of Foreign Ministers, accompanied by ministers of security, and approved the decision of the Andean community to undertake urgent joint measures to combat transnational organized crime. One of the measures adopted corresponds to cooperation on migration. The Andean community established a database with biometric and biographic data, including people with criminal records, either foreign or national, and which could be a threat to our countries. The Andean community then organized a meeting of its immigration authorities and approved a decision on specific actions to implement a speedy mechanism for the exchange of migratory information. The Andean Community Council of Ministers met in Lima and approved the decision on this subject. Decision 936 establishes different actions. The first is to develop and standardize statistical information on migratory movement. The second was to establish strategic partnerships, and third, to work out the status of prevention, protection, and assistance measures to people who are victims of smuggling of migrants and trafficking in persons, and the prosecution of the perpetrators, and then the setting up of other regional measures. Thank you.
Now I give the floor to the United States, to be followed by Mexico. The United States, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. The United States strongly supports the implementation of the UNTOC and the Protocol Against the Smuggling of Migrants, which promotes effective international action to prevent and combat the smuggling of migrants. The United States remains committed to working with our foreign partners to combat migrant smuggling networks and transnational criminal groups that exploit vulnerable migrants for their own financial benefit. The UNTOC and its protocol against smuggling of migrants are critical tools that can help law enforcement authorities work together to identify and target these criminal groups. The United States is committed to taking steps at the domestic, regional, and global levels to address migrant smuggling through prevention, international law enforcement cooperation and information sharing, and training and capacity building. The United States employs a comprehensive whole-of-government approach to investigate and prosecute transnational criminal organizations that engage in migrant smuggling, which includes working closely with our foreign law enforcement partners. The Department of Justice's Criminal Division partners with the Department of Homeland Security, which assigns prosecutors and investigators to work together on transnational migrant smuggling investigations globally that pose a national security or humanitarian concern, such as particularly dangerous conditions of travel. The United States also established Joint Task Force Alpha, which marshals investigative and prosecutorial resources to enhance U.S. law enforcement efforts to combat the most prolific and dangerous human smuggling and trafficking groups operating in our region. The task force targets actors and groups that abuse, exploit, and endanger migrants and concentrates its efforts at disrupting regional networks. The initiative involves regular and persistent coordination with foreign partners to expand capacity to dismantle transnational criminal organizations south of the U.S. border. In just over 3 years since its inception, the task force has achieved significant results, including numerous domestic and international arrests, substantial asset forfeiture, and multiple indictments and extraditions against foreign leadership targets. None of these achievements would be possible without substantial international cooperation from our foreign partners. The United States remains grateful to our foreign law enforcement counterparts for their cooperation and looks forward to continuing to work together to prevent and counter transnational organized crime engaged in migrant smuggling. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Now I give the floor to Mexico, to be followed by Paraguay. Mexico tiene la palabra usted.
Muchas gracias, señor.
Thank you, President. Distinguished delegates, Mexico's strategic position is a factor that fosters trade, mobility, and integration with the rest of the continent. However, today this component is used in a negative way by criminal organizations, strengthening their way of working within illicit markets. Despite the complexity of the situation, the government of Mexico has introduced numerous actions into our national security strategy, granting priority to the causes that lead to violence, and it is implementing multi-dimensional, cross-cutting and inclusive actions. Since September 2021, the Secretariat for Security and Civil Protection has coordinated new strategies with institutions that deal with migration and has exchanged valuable and useful information to identify and then prosecute cases involving the smuggling of migrants in order to dismantle criminal organizations. We would like to bring the attention of the conference to what we call the Bureau for the Judicialization of migration. It includes cross-cutting measures such as institutional capacity building, oversight, intelligence, combating corruption, court cases, international cooperation, a review of our legal framework, and social communication. Within this framework, the Unit for Migration Policy, Registration and Identification carried out 32 diagnoses of the migratory phenomenon to have a greater overview of human mobility. It also manages specialized training on migration. I'd like to highlight human rights here, and it is carrying out conversations in Mexico on subjects such as preliminary evidence and admissibility focused on the smuggling of migrants and criteria to qualify as legal the detention of migrant smugglers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I give the floor to Paraguay. Paraguay, you have the floor.
Gracias, señor.
Thank you, President. Delegates. The delegation of Paraguay would like to refer to this subject, reiterating that it is a complex problem with diverse origins, such as lack of opportunities in the country of origin, domestic conflicts, natural disasters, as well as different forms of discrimination, which lead to large-scale displacement of people. There are many conflicts in the world today, and in Latin America, we see this problem, which means that criminal groups use people who are in a vulnerable situation. Paraguay ratified the protocol on the smuggling of migrants. We participate actively in different multilateral coordination mechanisms, such as at the UN, the IOM, the OAS, and Mercosur, and also in bilateral ways. We've been carrying out actions through the Interinstitutional Bureau on smuggling of migrants with border controls and exchange of information and prevention. However, we still need a comprehensive approach to this issue in legislative terms. One of our priorities is presenting to Congress as soon as possible a draft law against the smuggling of migrants. We are currently working on that. Finally, we reiterate Paraguay's commitment to deal with the causes of migration and the effective implementation of international recommendations to deal with shared challenges in a comprehensive way and from a human rights perspective. Thank you.
Thank you for your statement. Now I shall close the list of the governmental delegation, and we can move on to the other list of speakers. And I give the floor now to the first speaker, which is Interpol. Interpol, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Excellencies, distinguished delegates. Interpol plays a key role in fighting migrant smuggling by providing technical assistance, capacity building, and operational support to dismantle transnational organized criminal groups. One of Interpol's most effective tools is the I-24/7 Secure Global Communication System, which allows law enforcement worldwide to exchange real-time information. This system gives access to Interpol's 19 criminal databases with over 150 million records, helping law enforcement track forensic evidence, stolen vehicles, and passports. A good example of how secure real-time information sharing can make a difference is the recent success of anti-smuggling operations in the Americas and the Caribbean. Over the past decade, information sharing in the Americas has significantly improved, with the number of records rising from 11.6 million to nearly 44 million. This increase has been vital in tackling migrant smuggling, as seen in Interpol's 5 Turkey operations from 2019.